We begin the Gemara today, the second line from the top of Yud Ches Amud Aleph, Reish Lakish Amar. The Gemara here is talking about the din of Tashlumin of carbon on Shavuos. Even though it's only one day of Shavuos, but we had a few limudim before, that just like on Pesach and on Sukkot, you have the days of Tashlumin 7 days, or by Sukkot it's actually 8 days. So similar on Shavuos, this Tashlumin. And the Gemara brought psukim for it. Here the Gemara brings Reish Lakish's drasha, which is similar to a drasha the Gemara brought before from Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov. So the Gemara of Reish Lakish Amar. Reish Lakish said the source for the Tashlumin of Shavuos is in this pasuk. It says in the Torah, V'chag HaKotzer. It refers to Shavuos as being the yontiv of Kotzer. What's a yontiv that you celebrate and you could also cut in the field? This refers to the yontiv of Shavuos. That's the time of harvest. So the shaila is Amos. When is this talking about? Is this talking about on yontiv itself? Are you allowed to cut the wheat in the field on yontiv? So this must mean that it's referring to the days of Tashlumin, and therefore here we see that the Chag, the Yontiv, in other words, the time that you have to be mashlim and bring your karbanis, continues even afterwards. That's why it's called Kotzer, even afterwards when you can harvest in the field. So Rabbi Yechanan disagrees with this raya. Rabbi Yechanan or Amalei Rabbi Yechanan, Elamayata, if that's your diuk from the word V'chaga Kotzer, so if so, ask the same question when it says Chaga Osif. The Torah refers to Sukkot as the yontiv when you gather all the produce from the field. Which is the yontiv when you gather the produce of the field. That's in Sukkot's time. So you ask the same question. Amos, when is this referring to? Is it in the time when it's a yontiv? Malacha b'yontiv mishari. Is this malacha allowed in yontiv? So rather, what is it referring to? To chalamayid. Chayla shamayid mishari. Is this malacha allowed in Cholamayid? Even Cholamayid, you're not allowed to stop gathering from the field. Torah just says Asif. We learned Cholamayid, unless it's a Davar or Ovid, you're not allowed to do any work in Cholamayid either. Ella, so therefore Rabbi Yechanan says, what's the taich of Chag Asif? It doesn't mean that you actually do the malacha of gathering in the field on the Yontif. Chag haba bizman Asifa. It's telling you that this is the Yontif that comes in the season of Asifa, in the fall. So the same thing here. When it says Chag HaKotzer, Chag haba bizman k'tzire. All it means is the yomtiv that comes in the time of harvest. But it doesn't mean that there's a Chag that's even in the days that you're allowed to do the harvest. Okay, so therefore he disagrees with this drasha of Reish Lakish. But we have the drashas already that the Gemara learned before.
Yeah, but that was
Elazar ben Yaakov.
He also basically that.
Karasem and V'kutzrechem. Right, but over there, though it's a little bit of a different drasha, it's because over here it says V'chag HaKotzer. So Rabbi Yechanan is pointing out that it's the same thing like the Lashon Chag HaOsif. Chag HaOsif means a Chag in the time period of Asifa. Chag HaKotzer means in the time period of Ktsira. But before he made more like a hekish, because it says a Karasem, and then it says V'kutzrechem. So we compare and say that the Karasem, the Yomtiv, you call on the time which is V'kutzrechem. So that drasha, I don't think Rabbi Yechanan is refuting that drasha. So now, Derech Agav, this Gemara brings up over here the whole source of the concept that Malacha and Cholamayid is Aser. From here I see the Tarvayus Viralu that both Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish hold the Chayla Shomayid Aser Basis Malacha. The Cholamayid, there is a certain Malachas that are Aser to do. What's the source for the Isser of Malacha of Cholamayid? The Gemara is going to bring different braises with different opinions here, a few different sources for the Isser of Malacha and Cholamayid. Tana Rabbana, we learned this. This is what we learned in Mayat Katan, correct? But here, it's interesting in Mayat Katan. I don't remember that the Gemara there brought the actual sources for the Isser Malacha and Cholamayid, but here the Gemara brings the psukim. So it says now in the braise as follows. It says in the Torah, Chagamatzah is Tishma Shivas Yamim. That you keep Chagamatzis, and then it says Shivas Yamim. The simple way how to read that pasuk is Chag Hamatzis Tishmar, and then it says Shivas Yamim Toichel Matzis. In 7 days you eat matzah. So really the Shivas Yamim goes on the mitzvah of eating matzah, or the fact that he only could eat matzah and not chametz. But the Gemara is darshaning it together as Chag Hamatzis Tishmar Shivas Yamim, which means Limed Al Choyle Shomayid. It's coming to teach me also regarding Cholamayid She'aser Ba'asiyas Malacha, that you don't do any malacha even on all the 7 days, including a Cholamayid as well. Divrei Rabbi Yeshia, this is the source according to Rabbi Yeshia. Rabbi Yonasan says, Ein tzarech. You don't need a source from a pasuk. Because Kal V'chomer, you could learn and know that Chol Hamoed is also to do Melacha with a Kal V'chomer. Umar Rishon V'Shvi, if the first day of Yom Tov and the seventh day of Yom Tov, she'en kedusha lefneim v'lachreim, the first day of Yom Tov, there's no kedusha, there's no Yom Tov before it. And the last day, the seventh day of Yom Tov, there's no Yom Tov following it. Also, basiyas malacha, so those 2 days, there's an issur of doing malacha on them. Chaylei shamayit, sheyesh kedusha lefneim v'lachreim. Chol Hamoed, which are the 5 days of Pesach in between the first and last day of Pesach, which is a Yom Tov, and it didn't say also basiyas malacha. Definitely, there's certain malachas that are also in the time of Chol Hamoed. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, this is not a good Kal V'chomer. Sheishis yimei breishis yechichu. How about the 6 days of every single day of the week? Sheyesh kedusha lefneim v'lachreim. There's a Shabbos before and there's a Shabbos after. Umetarim basiyas malacha. And you can do malacha in the 6 days of the week. So the fact that you have the 5 days of Chol Hamoed or the 6 days of Chol Hamoed and you have a Yom Tov before and a Yom Tov after is not enough of a reason to say that it should also be Aser. So the Gemara, no, you can't compare to the 6 days of the week. There's no special carbon musaf that's brought on a regular weekday. But on the other hand, on Chol Hamoed, carbon musaf. There's also a carbon musaf, a special carbon on Chol Hamoed. So maybe that's over here, when you have the Yom Tov before and the Yom Tov after, and you have the special carbon musaf, that's a reason that it should be aser to do melacha. So the Gemara, Rish Chodesh Yechiach. No, but I can prove to you from Rish Chodesh, sheyesh by carbon musaf. Rish Chodesh is also a day that there's a carbon musaf, umutar basiyas malacha. And on Rish Chodesh, you're allowed to do malacha. So therefore, you can't say just because there's a carbon musaf on Chol Hamoed, that's a reason that it should be also b'melacha. So the Gemara says, Mal Rish Chodesh, but Rish Chodesh is different. Mal Rish Chodesh she'en karoi mikra kodesh. Regarding Rish Chodesh, the Torah does not use the expression of mikra kodesh. However, regarding Chol Hamoed, shekaroi mikra kodesh, that the Torah refers to it with the term of mikra kodesh. So therefore, the hayel v'karoi mikra kodesh dinu she'aser basiyas malacha. So that therefore, dafka over here, it makes sense to say that it should be aser b'malacha. This is Hu Rabbi Yeshi explaining why you don't need a special pasuk from his Chagigah Matzos Tishma Shivas Yamim. The Torah calls it Mikra Kodesh. There's a Kedusha before and the Kedusha after. There's a carbon musaf in the Chol Hamoed, and therefore it's Aser Basiyas Malacha. That's the first Braisa. Gemara brings out another Braisa. Tanya Idach and a different Braisa.
He also knocks off the Kal V'chomer. He knocks off Rabbi Yonasan and Ein Tzarech Kal V'chomer. You don't need to have from before and after. You just say.
Because the Torah refers to it Mikra Kodesh.
Yeah.
Okay, L'chayri, you're right. L'chayri, you're right. Just the fact that the Torah calls it Mikra Kodesh is the reason it should be Asad Malacha.
Mikra Kodesh and it's a Musaf.
Okay. But L'chayri, even Mikra Kodesh itself, maybe that itself. I mean, the Gemara, the Braisa concludes that it's called Mikra Kodesh. So maybe the maskan of the Braisa is you don't even need the Kal V'chomer either. It's just the fact that it's called Mikra Kodesh. Tanya Yedach, in another Braisa we learned another source. It says in the Torah, Kol meleches aveda lo yisasu. You shouldn't do any meleches aveda, any work. So limit al chayla shamayit shasa basiyas melacha. This is a pasuk that refers to Chol Hamoed. How do we know it refers to Chol Hamoed? Because as Rashi brings it, right afterwards in the pasuk, it says Kol meleches aveda lo yisasu shivas yamim takrivi yishel Hashem. So we're connecting the Kol meleches aveda to the 7 days, which includes Chol Hamoed. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva says, Ein tzarich. You don't need a pasuk for the. This is not the pasuk that you're learning it out from. Because there's another pasuk that already says, Eile Moyadei Hashem. The pasuk there says, Eile Moyadei Hashem Mikroi Kodesh Ashetikroi B'Moyadam. So B'mei Kostav Medabra. What is this pasuk speaking about? In Berishain, is it speaking about the first day of Yom Tov? Harek Vanema Shabbasin. Regarding the first day of Yom Tov, it clearly says Shabbasin, that it's a Yom Tov that you're not allowed to do work. In B'Shvi, is it speaking about the 7th day of Yom Tov? Or B'Shmini, others are Geiris because it's going on Sukkot, on Shmini Atzeres. Harek Vanema Shabbasin. It says over there also clearly Shabbasin. So what is the pasuk speaking about when it says Elam Mayed Hashem b'chayloi shomayed? It's talking about Chol Hamoed. L'lametcha she'aser basiyas melacha. That even Chol Hamoed is also aser to do any melacha, the melachas of Chol Hamoed. Tanya Yidach. Now we have a third Braisa. You're still learning it from Elam Mayed Hashem. That's right from this pasuk. It's an extra pasuk. What is it going on? Mikroi Kodesh. It already said it said Shabbosim for the first and last day of the Yom Tov, so it's an extra pasuk. So it's going on Chol Hamoed. Tanyidach, we learned in the third Braise. It says, Sheishes Yomim Toichel Matzos, Uvayoyim Ashvi Atzeres Lashem. And the seventh day is Atzeres Lashem, that's the Shvi Shal Pesach, a Yom Tov. So what we learn is, because it starts with Sheishes Yomim, and then it says Vayoyim Ashvi, so Ma Ashvi Atzoir, just like Shvi it says Atzeres, which means refrain from doing work. Av Sheishes Yomim Atzurin. So too, the other 6 days, so it's not only, even though the pasuk it simply says you should eat matzah, but we compare to the seventh day, that also the other 6 days you should refrain of doing work. Now I would think, just like on the seventh day, which is a Yom Tov, you have to refrain of all work. So too on the 6 days, all 6 days, in other words including Chol HaMoed, you have to stop from all work. The Torah is saying only the seventh day you should refrain from work, which means Hashvi on the seventh day, so then Atzor, then you can't do any work. But on the 6 days, in other words, a Chol HaMoed, you don't have to stop of all work. So what do you stop from? What don't you stop from? The pasuk is telling you that the Isser of doing Malacha and Chol HaMoed is not as stringent as the Isser of not doing Malacha on a Yom Tov. So the Torah gave this over. The Torah itself did not spell out what and what not. It gave it over to the Chachamim. So number one, what the Torah gave over to Chachamim is, as Rashi here says, what this means is, Chachamim are the ones that establish when the Yom Tov is going to be. Based on the Kiddush HaChodesh, so they establish what day the Yom Tov is going to be, and therefore it will be Aser, and when it will be Mutter. And also, they gave over to the Chachamim regarding Chol HaMoed, Eize Malacha Asura, which Malacha would be Aser, Veize Malacha Muteres, and which Malacha would be Mutter. Right? So for example, a Davar Ovid will be Mutter. If it's not a Davar Ovid, if it's not something of financial loss, then it's going to be Aser. So the Torah, it's Ism in a Torah, but the Torah gave it over to the Chachamim to decide what should be Aser and what should not be Aser. But what the Chachamim decide is Aser is actually Aser min Torah. That's Rashi's shit over here in this Gemara.
The other Lumudim, you would know that you're allowed.
Correct. They did not make this distinction. Only this last Braisa makes this distinction here, correct? Rashi, as I just said, learns that the Pshat in this whole sugya it's bringing you psukim as sources to say that the Malach and Chol HaMoed is actually Aser min Torah. But here, Taisvis, this is Taisvis in a few places, and this is one of the sources, a long Taisvis here, that brings Rayas and says, no, all these psukim that the Gemara brought are all asmachtas, it's not real drushes, and the Issa of doing Malacha and Chol HaMoed is all Midrabanan, and Taisvis says, the very fact that you see that the same Malacha, if there's a financial loss, it's mutter, and if there's no financial loss, it's aser. He says it's not. If Minat Torah is such a thing, there should be such a kind of a difference. It can't be. So therefore, Taisus said it's one of the rayos of Taisus. So Taisus says it's all aser only midrabanan. But Rashi holds no. This gufa to Torah came over to the Chachamim that the davar over is mutter, and if not a davar over, it's aser. This is a fundamental machlekes over here. Okay, let's go back to what it said in the Mishnah. Umutarin behesped v'tainis. So it said in the Mishnah that when you have Shavuos that fell out on Shabbos, so on Sunday you're allowed to make a hesped and a tainis, even though usually on Isra Chag there's no hesped and tainis, but if it was on Shabbos, so on Sunday you make a hesped and tainis. Why? Is because you want to make a point that the tzaddikim are wrong. The tzaddikim said that Shavuos is always on Sunday. So therefore we want to show them that they're wrong, that Sunday is not a Yom Tov. In fact, the Gemara, the Gerse is supposed to be Vatanya, but we learned in Abraisa the following incident. Maise umeis Alakse belud. There was an incident of a Chacham by the name of Alakse that passed away in Lud. V'nichnasu kol Yisrael l'seiftei. All Yidden gathered to eulogize him. V'lahinichem Rab Tarfon, but Rab Tarfon did not allow mipnei sheyom tov shel atzeres haya, because it was Yom Tov of Shavuos. So the Gemara first explains what does this Braisa mean? Yom Tov Salkadaitach. Could it be that the Yidden came and gathered to eulogize him on Yom Tov? Ibi Yom Tov Mika also. If it was Yom Tov, Yidden would come to eulogize him. Ela Ema. What is the Braisa? What is the Gersa in the Braisa? Mipnei sheyem tvayachaya. Because really Yidden came, and what day was it? It was the day after Shavuos, which is called, like the Mishnah said, the Yom Tvayach, for all the Karbanis that were not brought on Shavuos. That was the day that they slaughtered all the Karbanis. And on that day they came to eulogize him, and Rav Tarfon did not allow. So the question is, why didn't Rav Tarfon allow? It said in our Mishnah that the day after Shavuos, you should allow to make a hesped. So the Gemara answer is very simple. Like Kashya, this is not a question. Kan b'yomtiv shechalias acha Shabbos. If the yomtiv of Shavuos falls out on any day of the week after Shabbos, that's what it means over here, acha Shabbos. If it falls out on any day of the week, so then there's no reason to allow a hesped the day after Shavuos. It's not going to take away from the mistake of the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim only said that on Sunday would be Shavuos. So if it's on any other day of the week, there's no reason you should allow a hesped. And kan b'yomtiv shechaliyas Shabbos. Our Mishnah was specifically speaking about, like the Mishnah said b'feidish, it's speaking about a yomtiv that fell out on Shabbos. And then on Sunday, to be lohaitzi from the opinion of the tzaddikim, they didn't allow a hesped. So it's not b'chlal not a stira. Very simple. This story. This is one of the Mekairis that you see that this whole inyan of Yom Tvoyach, which is mentioned here in this Braisa. If you learn the Mishnah, B'Pashtus, it comes out that only Beis Shammai, which held that you don't bring the Karbanis on Yontif, held that there's such a thing of a Yom Tvoyach the day after Shavuos, because you can't bring it all on Shavuos itself. According to Beis Hillel, though, you're allowed to bring Sai, the Karban Chagigah, and even the Karban Shalmi Simcha, and the Karban Oilis Riyah could all be brought on Yontif. So there's really no reason for there to be a special Yom Tvoyach. So the interesting thing is, the Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch, unless it's on Shabbos, right? But usually not. The Alter Rebbe in Shulchan Aruch brings down that even though it was only the opinion of Beis Shammai that you shouldn't bring it on Yontif, and the day after Shavuos is a Yom Tvoyach. And Beis Hillel disagrees, but nevertheless, as the Alter Rebbe, the minig became then, Beis Hillel agreed to Beis Shammai, and the minig became that the Karbanis were brought on the day after. At least the Oilis Riyah. The Oilis Riyah, where there's no Eichel Nefesh, on Yontif was brought the day after. So everyone asks a question on the Alter Rebbe, where's the Makkah? Where do you find such a thing that this became the minhag? There's no Beferish Gemara that says this anywhere. So one of the rayas is from here. Since you see over here this story of Rab Tarfon, and it said that it was called a Yom Tvoyach. So B'Pashtus, Rab Tarfon didn't pass like Beis Shammai. So Mistama, the reason why I called it Yom Tvoyach is because that became the minhag even by Beis Hillel as well. That B'Poyel they didn't bring it on Yontif. The Rebbe also brings a makar from another Gemara in Beya, where you see a similar thing over there, that the minig, it's not befedish, but you can learn from that Gemara that even Talmidei Beis Hillel, the minig was that they brought it on the day after Shavuos. And the Rebbe says an interesting vart, that the reason is because we know the whole union of Shavuos, that it says, Kula Ama Maida Debina Nami Lachem, that Shavuos, only the karbanis that you have, that you eat, and there's achila, shti, and there's a simcha in it, is brought in Shavuos. So therefore the minig became, even by Beis Hillel, that the carbon oilis re'iyah, which is going totally la Hashem, and it's not lachem, they left it for the day after Yom Tiv, and it became the Yom Tvoyach for those karbanis, the carbon oilis re'iyah. So one of the Mekairis is this story here in the Gemara. Okay, now we shift over, we start a new Mishnah, and from here, more or less, till the end of the Masechta, we're going to be discussing on many different halachas relating to the sugyas of Tumah and Tara. And Rashi here, in the Mishnah says, that the reason why this comes up in this Masechta, well, how is it connected to the theme of the Masechta, which speaks about the mitzvah of being Oile Regel, and the karbanis that were brought in the Beis HaMikdash when you're Oile Regel. So towards the end of the Masechta, it speaks about the fact that the Amei Haaretz, which usually are considered to be everything that they do is Tamei, but on Yom Tif, they are Tahir. When they come to Yerushalayim, even the Amei Haaretz are Tahir as well. Not like the rest of the year, as we'll see in the next page and towards the end of the Masechta. So because there's that's the relevance of this halacha of Tumah and Tara b'negei to Yom Tif, so the Mishnah already starts off discussing many different halachas b'negei to things of Tumah and Tara. Zok Heilige Mishnah, Noitlin liyodayim. You have to wash your hands if you're going to eat. So this concept of washing your hands is based on a gzeira that Chazal made. This is a Gemara in Shabbos, where there was a gzeira that they considered the hands of a person stam yadayim. Not even if you don't know specifically that it touched tumah. Stam hands are sheni l'tumah. So therefore, if you want to go eat, so noitlin l'yadayim, you have to wash your hands l'chulin. If you're eating chulin or l'maiser, whether you're eating maiser, l'trumah, whether you're eating trumah or l'kaidesh. But then there's an additional chumrah regarding kachim, that matbilin, that you have to toivel your hands. It's not enough. Rashi says, we're not talking about before, till here we were talking about a person that wants to come and eat bread, as we'll see soon, the maskan of the Gemara. But when it says here, l'kaidesh, this refers to a person that wants to eat any of the meat from the karbanis, a shlamim, or a chatos, or an asham, so they're going to have to toivel their hands in a kosher mikveh. Ulachatos, and...
Just the hands?
Yeah, I believe so. You have to, that's what Rashi says, you have to toivel the hands in a kosher mikveh. Ul chatos. Now there's an additional chumrah regarding chatos. When it says here chatos in the Mishnah, this refers to the waters of the para aduma, which is also called a chatos, mei chatos. So someone that handles and wants to touch those waters, there's an additional level of chumrah, and that is that im nitmu yadav, that if you know that your hands became tamei, so we're not talking about stam hands, but that are always sheni l'tumah. But the chumrah is that if you know that your hands became tamei, so then nitma gufay. It's as if your entire body became tamei, and the person has to toivel in order to be able to handle the water of the paraduma. Another halacha that sagt the Mishnah, tova l'chulin, a person that toiveled for the purpose to eat chulin. And the hochsak l'chulin, he only toiveled with the kavana in order to be able to eat from chulin. So asala meiser. He's still not allowed to eat from meiser. Okay, this is now here the point of the continuation of the Mishnah is, and really we'll see this throughout all sugi here, that each additional higher level, there's additional chumris that the chachamim imposed. These are all chumris midrabanan. So when you toiveled for chulin, so it's a good tefillah for chulin, but for meiser, the tefillah is not accepted. Tovel meiser, you toveled and you had in mind for meiser, so huchsak meiser, that's kavana that you tire from meiser, also l'truma, but you still aser and you still tameh to eat truma. Toval l'truma, he toveled with the kavana for truma, huchsak l'truma, so his kavana works for the truma, but aser l'kaidish, he's still not allowed to eat kachim. Taval l'kaidish, he toveled for kaidish, huchsak l'kaidish, his kavana is for the kaidish, and therefore aser l'chatas. He's still not allowed to eat, to handle, that is, the waters of the chatas of the paraduma. So here's the rule, taval l'chamor, if he toveled for what's more stringent, so let's say even for the most stringent, which would be the paraduma, so then mutter l'kal. So that tefillah that was for the more stringent level will be effective for what's less, well that's the lower standard than that. But if you toveled for what's less, as the Mishnah just said, it doesn't work for what's on a higher level. Taval v'loy hochsak, if a person was just bathing in the water. This is Rashi's pshat. He was bathing in the water and he immersed completely in the water. V'loy hochsak, he had no kavanah for anything whatsoever, for any tefillah whatsoever. Ki'ilu loy taval. It's as if he didn't tovel at all. As we'll see soon in the Gemara, and not, in the next, in your test, the Gemara says there that this has only been negate to meiser and up. Not beneged to chulin. Regarding chulin, if a person didn't have any kavanah whatsoever, he was just bathing in the water, the tefillah takes effect.
Towel means going to mikveh,
the
body?
Yeah.
So before we said, mikveh yadayim, over there.
Only yadayim.
Oh.
Over here, we're talking about a regular tefillah. Regular tefillah, yeah, full tefillah in the mikveh.
So Nathan means only that.
Correct. Before, I was talking all about the yadayim, yeah. A third halacha where the Gemara points out how you have this added stringencies, the higher up you go in the levels of the Kedusha. So big day Ama'aretz, the garments that are worn by an Ama'aret, which is not careful with tum and tara, medres leprushin. It's considered to be like a avatumah for the people that are prushim, that are careful that they eat their chulin with tara. The term medres means a zav that steps on or puts his weight on something. So he makes it a tameh. So all the clothing of an Ama'aretz, he could be a zav, and he's not careful, so therefore it has the status of a medris for a person that wants to be careful to eat everything betara. Big day prushin, the garments of those people that are careful to eat everything only betara, but still medres loich truma. It's considered to be tameh for those kayanim that are eating truma. There's still somewhat of a chashash that this person's garments in his house, that Rashi says his wife may have sat in it or put pressure on it, and therefore even if she's a zava or a nida, she made it tameh. So therefore by truma we're more machmer that even these garments of prushin will also be considered tameh. Big day truma, the garments even of those kainim that eat truma, medres l'kaidish, are still considered to be tameh for those that want to eat from the kachim. Big day kaidish, the garments of the kainim that eat from kachim, medres l'chatos, they still are considered to be tameh for those that are going to be handling the waters of the paraduma. And the Gemara brings two examples of this. Yosef ben Yezer, hayachasid shebekohana. He was a chassid amongst the Kayanim, and he was very careful with his garments when he was eating from Truma. But nevertheless, one of his garments was still considered to be Tomei regarding Kachim, because he was only using those garments when he ate Truma, but for Kachim it was still considered to be Tomei. Yochanan ben Gudgoda, so he was careful, and his garments were all tahir, even for the level of eating kachim with it. But nevertheless, but his garments would still considered to be tamei, to be used by someone that wants to handle the waters of the paraduma.
So before we said that, trouble the mice, books with the mice,
yes.
Also the tumor, so why should we think that the clothing are different?
It's a different halacha. I mean, it's the same concept, similar idea, similar concept, that what's tar for one is not tar for the level above it. Similar concept. Yeah, we have three different concepts here in the Mishnah. One benegea to the hands. The second thing benegea to the tefillah, the kavana of tefillah. The kavana of tefillah for a lower level does not work for a higher level. And the third one is the zehirus of your garments not becoming tamei, that when you are careful for a lower level, it doesn't help for the next level up.
Special kavanah for each thing?
Huh?
Special kavanah for each thing?
That's by tefillah, yeah. Yeah, that's what it says here. But I mentioned, besides chulin. By chulin, you don't have to have any kavanah whatsoever for tefillah. We'll see in the Gemara and Daf Yutes.
What's shot that you can't become tamei, but your body doesn't become tamei?
In the Mishnah.
Yeah.
Not always. There's certain tumas midrabanan. There are certain tumas that the rabbanan were guys that only your hands become tamei. By minatayra, by tum minatayra, there's no such a thing. It's talking about a tum midrabanan. Zok the Mishnah. So what did we see? One of the things it said, the first in the beginning of the Mishnah, it says the Gemara that is. It says chulin umaiser mi ba netilas yadayim. It said in the Mishnah that you have to wash your hands for chulin and maiser. In fact, the Gemara, is that true? You have to wash your hands for chulin and maiser. V'ramini, I'll ask you from a Mishnah. It says it's a Mishnah Mesachta Bikurim. It says as follows: Hatrume v'abikurim, whether truma or bikurim, chayav and aleim misa. If a zar, if the person that's not a kohen comes and eats from it b'meizid, he's chayiv misa. Rashi brings a pasuk umeisu boiki yechalaluhu, and chaimish. If you eat from it b'shaygig, so then you have to pay back not only what you ate, but an additional fifth, and also v'asal lezarim, yoivar and a lav as well, and v'hein nichsei kohen. The truma and the bikurim belong to the kayin. Rashi says you can use it for himself. You can use it to be mekadesh a woman with it. You can use it to buy whatever he wants with it. And also there's a chumrah that v'oilin be'echad umeya. If it gets mixed into chulin, it doesn't become batel b'rayv. It will only become batel if you have 100 times chulin against it. Special chumrah by truma and bikurim. And retunin etilas yadayim. And also before you eat from the truma or the bikurim, you have to wash your hands. So here it says clearly and specifically that by the truma and by the bikurim there's the chumrah that you have to wash your hands, because your hands are considered to be sheini l'tumah. And the harav shemesh, and also when you go to the mikveh where you are tamei, you have to wait until sundown in order to be able to eat from truma or bikurim. Harei eli b'truma bikurim. So all of these chumras here, these are halachas by truma and bikurim, mashe ein kein b'maiser, but all these halachas do not apply to maiser, and v'kol shekein b'chulin. And most definitely not regarding chulin. None of these chumras apply over here. There is one specific kula here, interesting, which is dafke by truma and bikurim, and not by maiser. Rashi points out, it said over here, nichsei kohen, that benegeh to truma and bikurim, that belongs to the kohen. You can do with it whatever you want. You can be mekadesh isha with it. But when it comes to maiser though, maiser sheni, you cannot be mekadesh isha with it. It doesn't totally belong to you. You have to eat it in Yerushalayim, and you can't be mekadesh isha with it. So that's an interesting chumrah that comes out by maiser. But the point is, what did it say here? One of the things was netilas yadayim. And it said, Masha enkim b'maiser b'chulin. There's no netilas yadayim b'maiser and chulin.
So the Shemesh was on the yadayim, even though he washed his hands himself.
No. The head of Shemesh is talking about tefillah. The Rashi clearly says, Tumah Dairaisa. Head of Shemesh refers to a person that be'emes became Tomei and he had to toivel, but you can't eat until the sundown. Okay? Yeah. So frekte Gemara, Kashya Maiser a Maiser. So we have a contradiction here regarding Maiser and Kashya Chulin a Chulin. And we have a contradiction regarding Chulin. Do you need Netilas Yadayim or not? So the Gemara says, Bishloime Maiser a Maiser lekashya. Regarding Maiser, the contradiction is not a question. So essentially, what's the point there? The hands of a person are a sheni l'tumah. The question is, if your hands are sheni l'tumah, could you eat meiser with it or not? So this, we see that there's a machlokes about this. There's harab meir and v'harab banan. So the machlekes here is between, we find that this is machlekes between Rab Meir and Rabbanan. The Tanan, there's another Mishnah, and this is a Mishnah in Masechta Para. Kol aton bias mayim. Anytime you have to toivel in the water, midivrei seifrim, you have a tumah midrabanan, which means that you're only a sheni l'tumah, right? There's different things. So one of them is benigeya to a person that his hands become sheni l'tumah, or if you eat something that's rishon l'tumah, the person becomes tomei sheni l'tumah, and he has to toivel in the mikveh. So the Mishnah there in Masechta Para says, Metamei es HaKodesh. If you are a Sheni L'Tumah, Midrabanan, so then you're going to be Metame Kodesh. Now what does Metame es HaKodesh mean? Metame es HaKodesh means that if you're going to touch Kachim, that Kachim is going to become a Shlishi L'Tumah, and not only will it become a Shlishi L'Tumah, if that Shlishi L'Tumah touches something else, it's going to become a Revi L'Tumah. The rule by Kachim is, and remember this, we're going to be learning about this in the next few blat, that until the end of the Masechta, basically, that by Kachim, the Tumah goes until the level of Revi l'Tumah. So a Sheni could make a Shlishi and a Revi. That's what Metame means. Metame means that what it made Tomei could make something else Tomei, up to a Revi. Upaisel es a Trumah. And it could only passel truma. What does passel truma mean? The sheni makes a shlishi, but the shlishi does not make a revi by truma. This is b'chlal, the terminology, the difference between metama and paisel. Metama always means that if it not only becomes tameh, but it could be metama something else. Paisel means it itself becomes pasel, which means tameh, but it can't be metama something else. Umuter l'chulin u'l'maiser. But this person, even though he's a sheni l'tumah, midrabanan, but nevertheless, by chulin and by ma'aseh, there's no issue. He doesn't have to go to the mikveh. He can eat. He can handle the food. It's totally mutter to eat the food for chulin and for ma'aseh. So what's this Mishnah saying here? That when it comes to chulin and ma'aseh, there is no tumah past sheni l'tumah. There's no shlishi l'tumah. Divrei Rab Meir, that's what Rab Meir says. So therefore, sheni l'tumah can eat any chulin and ma'aseh, no problem whatsoever. But Chachamim say that by Maiser there is an issue of Sheni L'Tumah, and therefore a person that's Sheni L'Tumah Midrabanan cannot eat the Maiser. So what do you see over here? There's a machlokes b'negei to a person that has a Sheni L'Tumah, whether that's an issue by Maiser or not. So therefore, this that the Mishnah said over here, that a person has to wash his hands, which Chachamim will geyser on your hands, a sheni l'tumah, before you eat meiser, so that's dependent on this machlokes of Rab Meir and the Chachamim. Rab Meir says there's no shlishi l'tumah for meiser, and therefore if you're sheni l'tumah, you can touch and eat the meiser. There's no issue. You're not going to make the meiser tummy. Mashenkein, Chachamim say that by meiser there is an issue. You're going to make the meiser tummy. Okay, so therefore that's the answer to the contradiction b'negei to whether you have to wash your hands for meiser. But regarding chulin, there's still a question. And our Mishnah says you have to wash your hands before you eat chulin, and in the Mishnah that we quoted before from Masechta Bikurim, it said you don't have to wash your hands. So the Gemara loikash, it's not a question. We can answer as follows: Kam ba'achila. In our Mishnah, it's when a person wants to eat chulin, then you have to wash your hands first. And kan b'negiyah. In the Mishnah that we quoted before from Masechta Bikurim, it's talking about touching. So touching, if you just want to touch the food, so over there the Mishnah said that only by Bikurim and Trumah, you can't touch it if you're a Sheni L'Tumah, because you're going to make it a Shlishi L'Tumah. But by Chulin, there is no Shlishi L'Tumah, so there's no problem to touch it.
So, and the Mishnah...
In our Mishnah, when it said Neitlin, Liyadai, and L'Chulin, it's talking about eating. Huh?
What makes the tumah, the touching?
No, Chachamim, true, but the Chachamim will geyser. This is all midrabanan. Chachamim will geyser that when you want to come to eat chulin, so that you have to wash your hands first. Not because you're going to make it tamei, and chanami, you don't make it tamei, but still Chachamim will geyser that when you eat it, you should wash. But by touching, they weren't geyser this, and therefore over there you can touch it, even if you didn't wash your hands. Ask if Rav Shimi Barashi. So Rav Shimi Barashi asks on this. At kan loy pligi Rabbanan alei the Rab Meir. So before we brought a machlokes between Rabbanan and Rab Meir. So but what was their machlokes? Elo b'achila. Number one, their machlokes is only regarding eating, not regarding touching. And what kind of eating? Elo b'achila de meiser. In that Mishnah that we quoted from Masechta Para, they were arguing regarding a person that wants to eat meiser, if there's an issue that it's going to become tamei and therefore you can't eat it. So that's the only machlokes. Av b'negiyah de meiser. If a person wants to just touch meiser food, Ubachile de chulin, or even if a person wants to eat from chulin, loy pligi. They're not arguing about that b'chlal. Everybody agrees that if you want to touch meiser and your hands are sheni l'tumah, you can touch it. You want to eat from chulin and your hands are sheni l'tumah, you're allowed to eat it. So how do we answer the pshat in our Mishnah here that said that before you eat from chulin, you have to wash your hands? Answers the Gemara, different answer. Elo idividi b'achile. We're talking all about eating the chulin. V'loy kashi, and it's not a question. Kam b'achile denama. When we're chachamim geyser that a person should have to wash his hands before he eats, only if he's coming to mamish eat a suda. He's coming to eat bread. Over here, chachamim said that you have to wash your hands even for chulin, and the reason is because they wanted it to be. It's all excited because of truma. Really, there's only an issue by sheni l'tumah regarding truma. That by truma you're going to make the truma tame when you touch it. But chachamim were geyser b'negei to chulin as well, that when you eat bread you should wash your hands. But kan b'achila de peiri. But when you eat stam peiris over here, you don't have to wash your hands. And that's what the Mishnah said in Bikurim, that Natilas Yadayim does not apply to Chulin or to Meiser either, because it's peiris. And peiris, you don't have to wash your hands. Rav Nachman said, a person that does wash and he's just eating peiris, he's a balgaivi, he's being smart, he's being machmer more than he has to. So that's the answer, and that's the pshat, that we only wash for eating bread and not for eating anything else.